Welcome to Check-In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and are great for organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help both educate and inspire us. Today, I have Josh Allan Dykstra joining me. He is a future of work keynote speaker and the world's foremost practitioner on human energy. He spent the last 2 decades building 5 companies and working with some of the most iconic brands on earth. Josh is also an author, TEDx speaker, founder and CEO of The Work Revolution, where they fight for the future by fixing work, which is like speaking my love language right there, Josh. No surprise that we have been friends for a while. So Josh, thank you for being here. I appreciate you joining me.
Oh my goodness. My pleasure, Jason. So happy to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to do something that I actually am almost sort of remiss to do because, you know, everybody on the planet's talking about AI. So I'm always usually the guy that goes the opposite direction when everyone else is doing something. But I am really curious to get your take because we're going to talk about kind of the intersection of AI and culture and HR and organizations. And I think that's really important to dig into. And there's a lot of confusion there. So I'm anxious to hear what you're thinking and challenge people maybe in how they're thinking about the role of AI in the future of work. So before we do that, though, I want to get to know you a little bit more, share a little bit more about you and who you are. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I like to say that I've really only done kind of one thing for the last almost 20 years, which is try to help work not suck. And I realized this pretty early on. I was going to be a musician. You know, I was going to be a performing musician, i.e. rock star. You know, I'm a classically trained pianist. I play a bunch of instruments and I love being I grew up on stages, you know? And so I thought, man, I should probably do this music thing. And it turns out music's a horrible way to do things like buy food. And so I thought maybe I should, do something else as a career. I still love music. But so I had all these jobs, when I was a musician. And I was reflecting when I realized I wasn't going to do music anymore. I was reflecting on all these jobs I had. And I realized that when my job was better, my life was better. When my job was crappy, my life was crappy. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I did a tiny bit more research, realized this isn't a Josh thing. This is an everybody thing. And then I did a little bit more research and realized, oh my goodness, even though our lives are revolving around work, most people hate it. Most people are in the my work makes my life worse category. I was like, that is really effed up. Like that is really not cool. So I kind of devoted my life and career to like seeing what I could do to make a dent in this really, really big problem. And I've done this in a lot of different ways over the last almost 20 years. So I've been a consultant and a workshop facilitator and done a lot of assessments and leadership retreats. And, I've certified coaches and consultants, and I actually built a tech company. We tried to build some technology over the last 5 years to, again, go after this same problem of trying to make work better for humans. And now I'm back to the world of speaking and thought leadership. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride, and, maybe we've made a little dent in this problem. But yeah, I know both you and I have been working on this for a long time, Jason. So
yeah, it feels like the mission we're definitely singing out of the same hymnal for sure, I would say, over the years. And I've always appreciated the energy and perspective and passion that you have for this work, and have observed, I think, interestingly over the last, 5 or 10 years, like all of the different angles and approaches and things like that you have taken to try to bring tools or bring resources or to like really do this work. Like one of the things I'm super curious about how did your perspective shift? Maybe it didn't shift at all, but how did your perspective shift when you started running companies, when you became the one that was building the employer, being the employer, being the one that was employing people, being the one on that side of like creating the experience? I'm curious, like what perspective did that bring, or did that shift anything for you from before you did that?
Yeah, that was always something I wanted to do, before I did it. And once I got into it, I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be easy, right? Because I've been consulting and watching and helping other leaders do this for a long time. But yeah, when you're in that role, the gravity of it is something else, right? It is something more intense. And I think what I was really surprised by was just all the almost the minute choices that a leader makes that either bring energy to their organization or not, right? Like, and it gets down to, there's just millions of little tiny choices from, all of the, like the way we post jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, right? Like all of the choices that go into the language we use and the spacing and how long is it, how short is it, how detailed, right? Like, to how are we managing our meetings? To like, there's just a million different culture, like human related decisions where business systems intersect with human beings. And I mean, contracts, right? Like legal stuff, like they're just on and on and on, where the default path of an organizational leader is really one of sucking. And I mean that literal, like in a literal way. Like the default path of writing contracts or posting jobs is a path that sucks the life out of people, right? Like trying to hire people, like the hiring process, like the general process, it sucks the freaking life out of everybody. And if you want to do something different as a leader, holy crap, it takes so much energy and intentionality and thoughtfulness and time to do it differently than the default path. And so I think that's the thing that just really struck me as an operator, right? So as a CEO, oh my goodness, there's so many things here. We make so many little decisions. And if we go down the default path, it's probably going to suck. And so trying to do something different was really, really often very hard.
Well, and that is really powerful in terms of also, at least for me, it resonates with, I think, why my work has evolved in the way that it has, is that, we both spend a lot of our time in thought leadership work, and thought leadership work is so fun, right? It's so fun and it's so meaningful and it feels great. But like, we're up there saying, there's this other way, like this other way, like and people can sit there and they can see it and the light bulb goes on and they get it. But the distance between sitting there and getting it and actually doing it is much harder. That path is harder than you think. And so that's where, like, over the years, I realized that if I actually care about change, then I have to find ways to not only like get that light switch to go on, but then provide some really simple tools, like some things that help make that next step or the next 3 steps doable, right? That's so important, because I think we put so much in, and it's leaders are more stretched today than they've probably ever been. And so it's interesting. That's a really great perspective. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I like I talk a lot about this kind of energy-based approach to work. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons I like this principle, because if you start, like right now, the organizational model is largely one of sucking the energy out of people to make the machine work. If you flip that around and say, no, the machine should actually give the people energy, everything works better. But then you just get a lot more efficiency out of everything. And it becomes an organizing principle that you can use for just about everything in your organization. We can say, does that thing that I'm about to do bring people energy, or does it suck the life out of people? And this is not an easy path, but it really is a rewarding and like helpful, meaningful principle. And it's what we try to do in our companies.
Yeah. I love that. Energy. It's all energy. I'm with you. So final question on just general getting to know Josh. What is the thing about your work that you love the most?
I think that, like, if we're talking about like the moment of pure flow state, like I can't get enough of it kind of time for me, it's the moment after doing a keynote talk or a presentation of some kind where we move into the Q&A part and I get to interact with the audience. Maybe this is like my radio DJ background, like coming, I don't know what this is, but there's something about like the live banter, like being on the hot seat, like having to have all your shit together, right? Like I just love that. that moment when I have to be on, and like, it just puts me in the zone. And I just love interacting with people about a topic that I care so much about. It's so fun.
All right. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little AI. And I think it makes sense. You've been talking future of work for a long time before it was cool, before it became the thing to do, right? Like it is now. And I think, we were chatting a little bit right before we clicked record, and you sort of rightly so said, in the conversation about the future of work today, it's hard to escape AI, right? I would almost say AI has almost like sucked the oxygen out of the room to some extent, and that it's really hard to have a conversation about anything else other than AI right now, because there's so much uncertainty, there's so much anxiety, there's so much consternation, I guess, about what is this and what should we be doing, and is it taking jobs or not taking jobs? Is it, you know what I mean? Like there's just a lot of noise and a lot of uncertainty there. And so I know you have, this has kind of been central to the work you've been doing recently, is trying to help people make sense of this and try to understand where we're at and where we're not at, what you should be probably worried about or at least thinking about, and what you can maybe not worry as much about. And so I'm excited to pull that apart. So let me start with this question for you is, as you have been looking at this, and of course we're interested in talking about AI at the intersection of, within the workplace as it impacts culture and people. And I think that feels like a counterintuitive conversation. I spent all my time talking about the human workplace, right? And then it's like, what role is AI going to play in the human workplace? And I think you're going to argue that it's going to play probably a pretty big role. But tell me where we are today. As you have looked at this, as you've been talking to people, how would you describe the current state of affairs relative to AI and the workplace, kind of specifically in the domain of the work that we do?
Yeah. I think maybe the first thing to say to everybody who's listening is that if you do feel some sort of like low-grade anxiety, or I wouldn't blame anybody for having panic attacks about this, but I'm not even just talking about that. Like, I think there's just this like noise kind of lurking in the back of our minds. It's like, what is this gonna do? And because it's so, I think it's just very confusing. So as a kind of futurist type of person, I didn't really want to get into AI, to be truthful, but like to your point, it was just unavoidable. Like I felt like I had to get my perspective on this if I wanted to be any kind of like futurism kind of speaker. And so I've been researching this for probably a solid year or more without saying really anything about it, just because like trying to get my arms around it, trying to get my mind around it. So I think the first thing to say is like, if you're feeling confused or anxious about it, like you're not alone, right? It's not abnormal. It's not weird. Something like 80% of us think AI is going to profoundly transform our jobs. About over 40% of us think our job might not exist in the next decade, right? So it's like, it's crazy. Like there's a lot of, so if you're feeling, whatever you're feeling about this, I just want to say it's okay, right? Because it's confusing and there's a lot of stuff happening. And the other thing I would say is that there tends to be this kind of dualistic perspective of the future that's coming based on AI. And the way I see this, right, we've got either like the Star Trek computer or we've got the Terminator, right? And these are kind of like, if you boil it all down, right, we kind of end up in one of these places where we've got this really benevolent kind of assistant on the Enterprise that just helps me when I need it. Or we've got, murderous robots with red eyes and big ass guns, right? Like these are the two, the two futures. And, the one that sticks in your mind is the murderous robot because it's effing terrifying. And I think that's understandable. And I think we have to remember that just because it's more sticky doesn't mean it's more likely, right? So like, yes, that's memorable. Like that opening scene of Terminator 2, right? Like where the robots are like, just like walking on the skulls of humans, right? It's really memorable, but like that's not, there's a lot of choices that we need to make between here and there. And it doesn't mean that that's likely just because it's the image that sticks in your mind. So A, it's okay if you're anxious about this. B, it's not just because the murderous robot is memorable doesn't mean it's more likely. So I think we start there. And then we kind of can get into saying, all right, what actually is this? Let's decode it a little bit. Like, let's look under the hood and understand what's actually happening. And what I find that when we do that, then we actually decrease our anxiety a little bit. And there's actually studies also that show that when you use AI more, you decrease your anxiety. So that would be the other thing I would encourage people to do is if you're feeling a little bit on the edges, you're feeling a little bit scared about it, actually try to engage it, because you will probably feel better if you do.
Well, I find kind of a deep irony in the truth of that, because, right, so much of what divides us as humans right now, socially, is an ignorance about one another. We're scared of people that are different than we are. And if we just would spend some time getting to know them, suddenly you realize this isn't near as scary as I think it is. So I just find a real irony in that it's always the case. Fear is bred and grown and thrives in ignorance. And so the more you know, the less likely you are to be afraid.
Yep. And I think listeners, you'll see as we talk more about this, is that kind of flip it's very apparent when we talk about some of the deficiencies of AI. It highlights really the strengths of humans. And so this really can inform, I think, the way we utilize AI and what we need to do better as humans, in the human practices of our organizational work, right? To your point, Jason, that's, how do we do that better? I think we can actually use some of the deficiencies of AI to illuminate a path forward on that.
So let's call out a few things. Just, I'm curious, because there's a lot of back to ignorance breeds fear. So what are the things that as you've been digging around in this and really looking at what's actually going on, what are you finding are the biggest assumptions that people are making about what AI is or what it's going to do that maybe isn't as grounded in reality as they might think?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. And maybe some listeners say, well, we'll already know this, but if there's even one that doesn't, I think this bears repeating, is that what we are currently calling AI, artificial intelligence, is largely actually an LLM, which means a large language model. So we're starting to conflate these terms pretty effortlessly. And this is something that people need to be aware of if they're not, because a large language model, LLM, and this is the ChatGPTs and the Geminis of the world. This is the primary way that your typical worker is going to interface with this thing we're calling AI, is through one of these kind of chat functions, right? There's all sorts of stuff being built on the back end of these things, and that's something a little different. But these LLMs, they work. I think it helps to understand how they work, because the way they work is we fed them huge amounts of data from language, like basically all the language on the internet data, right? So that is a lot of data. It is, right? So it would take us, right? It would take a human 170,000 years reading 8 hours a day to read all of this data, right? So it is a lot of data, but it's only one specific kind of data, right? It's really a very language-based type of intelligence. And so I think what's important for people to understand is that there are other kinds of intelligence that we need to talk about. So, and just when we talk about pure data even, if we look at the visual data that we get through the optic nerve in our eyeballs, right? It's the amount of data that a human receives through your eyes exceeds the amount of data the huge amount of data that would take 170,000 years to read. A 4-year-old human has processed more data just through their sight. So by the time we're 4 years old, we spent 4 years on this planet, we've processed more visual data than what that is, than what all the LLMs have consumed. So I think it's important to just put this in a perspective, right? And say, yes, that's a lot of data. They are very smart in some ways, but putting the label intelligent is a little bit of a stretch. because it's really kind of only accounting for one particular type of intelligence. And humans, we have something that I would call embodied intelligence. Right? So we get all of this other processing through all of our senses. Right? So we just talked about the eyes and how much data there is in that one sense. So just think about how much other contextual data humans are processing. When we talk about the artificial intelligence of an LLM, it's a bit misleading, right? It's a bit grandiose, because we're kind of putting a really big label on something that actually isn't maybe quite as big as we think it is.
Well, it highlights one of the things I think about in that is that strikes me is that it highlights how powerful language is, right? The how much lives in language and the efficacy and impact of effectively using our language. It's really striking, I think, and that's a thing that I think hits us probably. And probably as humans, that's, communication isn't necessarily the thing that we're often sort of masterful at. And so that the fact that this thing can do it better than we do sometimes probably is a little bit, puts us on our heels.
Yep.
Well, okay. So let me zoom. Okay. That was really good. So what are you hearing, or what do you see that people think that this current version of AI, what we're calling generative AI or whatever we're calling this first version, the LLMs, what are the assumptions that are being made right now that you think are flawed or sort of out ahead of what's actually here?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, to kind of pull this thread a little bit more and talk about the idea of intelligence a little bit further. When we put a label of artificial intelligence on this, I think what that kind of implies is that there's one kind of master form of intelligence, right? So again, it's not accounting for all the different kinds of intelligence, right? But there is no one best kind of intelligence. It's the best metaphor here is transportation, right? The best kind of transportation depends on where you're wanting to go and what you're trying to do, right? Like sometimes you need a plane, sometimes you need a bike, sometimes you need a freight train, right? Like it really depends entirely on what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. And intelligence is kind of like this, right? There's no best kind of it, right? So if you're in the orchestra, you need musical intelligence. If you need playing a sport, you need body intelligence, right? If you're in nursing, you need emotional intelligence. This is why the label artificial intelligence is pretty problematic, right? Because it's just one specific kind of language-based intelligence. But then we slap this label on it, calling it artificial, meaning it's somehow like equivalent to all of the other kind, right? It's like better, right? So that I think that's really something that people just need to be aware of. And then where the next place we go with this, I think, is to understand something you said, because I think many of us maybe have had kind of a magical experience with an LLM where it's like I'm typing something in there and I want it to like make my writing better or whatever, and it comes back with something really impressive, right? Like it really can be quite good at this, and it's hard not to think sometimes that there's like a tiny philosopher inside the machine, right? Who's just like brilliant and just like has a way with words, and right, like, and this kind of humanization of the AI LLM is a really dangerous thing, right? We should not be humanizing these machines for a reason we'll talk about in a second, even more when we talk about trust. But this first principle, I think, is all about humanizing, and so what I'm basically saying is, don't humanize your AI. Don't humanize the LLM. There is no tiny philosopher in there, and I'm going to explain more about that in a second. But what you should be doing is so again, the flip side, what's on the backside of that is what we should be doing better is something that you already mentioned, Jason. We should be humanizing our humans, right? Like we should be doing right? So the deficiency of the AI kind of shows us what we should be doing more in our culture. We've got a lot of work to do in most of our organizations to humanize our humans, right? We're not very good at appreciating diversity. We're not very good at building inclusive places to work. We're not very good at communication, right? There's so many things we can do to appreciate the diversity and beauty of our humans. And that, I think, is the first key that we can understand with AI, because AI is really deficient at this, right? There's no human in there, but there's a lot of humans around you in your team. And that's where you should probably put your focus.
So in the application of that, like one of the things I wonder about is then there's an opportunity there to, like, I have found it to be really interesting in terms of because of all of the data that is there and all the information that it has access to, that, like, I think it could be a tool, which is how I think you should think of it. Could be a tool, though, to aid with that, right? To help, that's kind of the irony, is I do think that these tools could be there and could be crafted in a way that become a tool or a resource to help us, remember how to be more human, to help us remember how to invite others to be, you know what I mean? Like, it's a really counterintuitive thing when you think about it. But if you remember that it is technology and it is a tool, then it changes everything.
I think that's right. And we'll get there a little bit with kind of the third key. I think you're absolutely thinking in the same direction that I am. So let's maybe come back to that one. But that is
all right, cool.
Exactly the place to go, I think.
All right. So key number one, we started going through this. All right. So now we're into it. So key number one, what's key number two then? I know you told me in advance 3 keys. So let's do the 3 keys.
So the first one, humanize, right? Don't humanize your AI, your LLM, humanize your humans. And the best way to do that is through a lens of, like, understanding what brings them energy, right? So we already kind of talked about this a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, really, like, understand what brings them energy. And we've got a worksheet that corresponds with that. And we can talk more about those too when we get to the maybe, what's next at the end. The second one is all about trust. So when I was doing all of the research for this, AI kind of talk that I was building, I actually asked GPT, I was like, hey, can you tell me a story about a time when, a human tried to use AI and it was, it had some sort of kind of like questionable result, right? And, like, can you give me an example of this? And, it told me this beautiful story about, and I asked it, please tell me a true story, cite your sources, right? I need an example for my talk that's true. And it told me this beautiful story about this poet who decided to make a point, as poets like to do, and used AI, but secretly, to write his poem. And he turned his poem into the contest. He won the contest, and then he revealed, this was written by, GPT-3 or whatever. And, to make this point that here I am as a poet trying to make a living, but there's this machine over here that kind of lives in my house and doesn't do anything to help me, right? It doesn't pick up my laundry. It doesn't, like, help me with the dishes, but it wins my poetry contests, right? Like this dissonance that we feel between what these things can do and what maybe we want them to do. I think a lot of us maybe want more of a Rosie the Robot, instead of this thing that wins poetry contests. So I was like, oh my goodness, this story is beautiful. Like, this is perfect. This is going to be perfect for my keynote. And so I said, are you sure that is a true story? And it said, yes. And I said, are you sure? And it said, no. It said, this is a plausible story, but the specific anecdote I shared was more of a humorous hypothetical than a documented true event. Literally, like, I screenshotted this. This is word for word what it said. A humorous hypothetical, not a documented true event. And this is the next problem with LLMs. And so again, to kind of understand what's going on here, is we have to understand how these things work, because they're really different than other pieces of technology other machines we've worked with before. So if we think about something like a calculator, I think we all grew up with a calculator, right? The calculator can't be wrong. I can be wrong, right? I can type wrong numbers into it, or I can maybe not know how to use the functions, but it can't be wrong. LLMs are not this, right? Like, as you can see in my story, it will happily be wrong if it tells you a story that it thinks you want to hear. And this is because LLMs are at their core probability machines, right? They're taking the last word and predicting the next word. And so in a very real way, they can't be factual, right? It's not the way they're built. They're built for probability, not for factualness. And so this is a really important thing for people to know, especially as these things get into like helping us more with search engine kinds of things, right? The more we turn to these technologies and think about, if we cannot think about them as these are not factual calculator kinds of machines, they're probability machines. And I think, I want to talk to some more AI experts about this. My suspicion is that because we've trained them on a bunch of human language, to our point earlier, I think some of our like insecurities might be baked into this thing, because it's like it really feels like it wants to please you. I don't know if you've noticed this, right? But it feels like, right? It's like, I will tell you this beautiful story because I think it's what you want to hear. It doesn't, like, truthiness is not actually a factor. It's about probability and what I think you want to hear. And so I think that's something else that's really interesting about these technologies. But we just have to be careful not to think about them as calculators. They're not fact machines. They're probability machines.
Yeah. I have used, it was interesting, and my experience with that was using, I think it was ChatGPT, maybe Claude, I don't remember, one of the two, to do some research for something I was working on. And so I was looking for research, and it comes back. And then I would always say, like, include your sources. I need citations so that I can, and 6 out of 10 of the sources were void. They didn't go anywhere.
Exist. Yeah.
And that's what, and then along that same time, when I was shortly thereafter, somebody introduced me to this new tool, Perplexity. And that tool I have had a completely different experience with, because it's designed search first. It's search first AI. So it, like, all of the references are clean. It shows you exactly where they came from. And so it's like, back to your point about trust, like, if I do search there, I actually am more likely to trust the results I get because of the experience I've had, because of the citations. Then I don't trust anything I get back from ChatGPT in terms of research anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just a really important thing for us to know about this, right? To your point, there's probably ways around it, right? You can be smart, you can use the right tools, but you got to always check your sources. Yeah. Because, man, sometimes they just make stuff up.
Well, and there was,
they don't feel bad about it.
Listen, there was a time when we could trust the news, right, to be factual, or at least we thought we could. And now it's a very different world we live in today. So, yeah. All right. So that's key 2. Is there anything else about key 2? What's the flip side around that then?
Right. So if you don't trust the machine, what should you trust? I think the answer again is your team, right? Is your people. And so I think the practice here, right? So the next step is really, like, work more on building psychological safety in your team. I think this is going to be crucial for organizations, because this stuff is going to get wilder before it gets calmer, right? Like, AI really is going to eat everything, right? It's going to merge with all software. Right? We're sure going to try our best to make that happen. And we just need to be able to have a safe place where we can trust the people that we work with to navigate the craziness of the next decade, right? So I think leaders would be very smart to invest in creating more psychological safety amongst their teams, because it's already wild. It's going to get wilder and weirder, and we need a group of people around us to help us sort through it all.
Well, and I think as you're saying that, it's like something is striking me about that we talk about psychological safety so often in kind of an abstract sense. It's become one of those terms that everybody's like, it's a good thing. Everybody wants psychological safety, of course. Yeah. But what I'm realizing as you say this is that the reality of why is that, like, for what we just described, is now, like, I need to be skeptical about everything. I need to be skeptical, like when I'm using my tool to do research, when I'm asking chat, like I need to be skeptical. I need to be asking questions. But then you realize everybody on your team now is using these same tools. And so part of the contract, or part of the way we're going to keep ourselves accountable to doing the right kind of work, is we have to not only be skeptical with our tools, but we have to be willing to be skeptical with each other, which means me saying to Josh, like, that sounds like almost too good of a data point. Where did that come from? And you not saying, are you calling me a liar? Like, what are you, like that's why like we need to be able to say, I totally get why you're asking that question. We live in this world where we can be getting bad info. We need to be able to challenge each other and ask questions as a means of helping each other. And that's going to get pretty, like you said, it's going to get pretty gnarly before it gets better. So that is incredibly important.
I think that was really well said, Jason. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. What's key number 3?
That. Yeah. And we'll give you all a worksheet for the practices of psychological safety also. So that's the other thing. To your point, we know it's important. Who cares? Like the knowledge of it, I don't care at all. What I care about is that you practice the practices that create it. And so that's what the worksheet will help you do. So we'll get that to you. The last key, I think, is direction. So we've got, humanizing, we've got trust, and then we've got direction. And I think this gets back to your earlier point, Jason, about, so how could we actually use this technology then to actually make us more human? And the answer, I think, is yes. Because what we have to remember about these machines is that there is no, there's no tiny philosopher in there, right? They're probability machines. I actually like to think of them like the little Star Wars droids, right? The ones that are just kind of like, bumbling around and they're like polishing your spaceship or whatever, right? Like this technology is a little bit like, it's a little bit like a dumb droid. And I mean that with all respect to this technology, because it's amazing, right? Like it really does do some crazy, awesome stuff. It does. But it is not wise in what to do with itself. That is for humans. Like that we are all like air traffic controllers of this technology now. And so I think the implication there is we need to be really thoughtful about what we use this tech for. So I think that goes exactly back to your point, right? Like we can use this tech to help us, be more human with each other if we want to. I think the other implication here is I would encourage listeners to maybe take a moment and think really deeply about what it is you're working on in the world. Because there is no shortage, like we are in, when we talk about, the next 5 years, we can maybe talk a little more about this, but there's no shortage of like big problems, big, wicked problems. And I think what's going to become increasingly important for everybody who's up for the challenge is to say, okay, what wicked problem can I help solve in the next decade of my life? As stuff gets really crazy, this tech comes online, it kind of tries to merge with all of our other tech. Like you have to be the air traffic controller of your life and where you're focusing this technology for you. So, and there's just, you could take your pick, right? You want to work on climate stuff. Do you want to work on poverty? Do you want to work on clean water or housing or good jobs or healthcare or refugees? Like there's just there's so many. What matters to you? What pisses you off enough that you actually want to devote a chunk of your life to helping it? And these tools are actually going to help accelerate your effectiveness in that space, but you have to choose the space, right? Like you pick what problem you want to work on. And so that's why I say we have to give these droids a direction, right? They really don't do that. That's for the humans to do. And I think the work of the human here is to really think about, okay, what are you working on? Work on something that matters, right? And only you can really define that, right? Like what matters to you, but like do something that matters. There's so many things that the world needs from you. Get yourself a droid and, put it to work in that direction.
I love that call to action. So you have mentioned this, and I should have probably teed this up more directly, but you have a resource that you have created to help people understand these kind of factors or keys, give them some guidance on what they can do. We will share a link to that, or if you want to talk, I know we set up a link for people to go to. If you want to share that, what is it?
Yeah, so you just go to my website, which is joshallan.com. So it's ALLAN, joshallan.com/Jason2025. So joshallan.com/Jason2025. That will take you to the resource page. I think we're also going to put up a QR code so you can snap that if you want to. But otherwise, go to that link and you throw your email in, and then it takes you to a resources page where you can download worksheets for all of this stuff. So we've got a individual worksheet for the humanization, right? How do you figure out the energy human part of this? We've got a worksheet for the trust part of this. How do you build psychological safety? And then another worksheet for this idea of like, am I working on the problem I want to be working on? So we call this one our mission/magnet. Like, what's the magnet that's pulling you into the future you want? So the 3 worksheets. So yeah, please go grab them. We want this. Both Jason and I think deeply care about the now what of this. So we'd be delighted if you go and get these worksheets and do something with this.
Absolutely. All right. So let's bring it home. I have a couple of questions I ask everybody because it's my podcast. I'm curious about these things. So one is, what is a big challenge or obstacle that you're wrestling with in your work right now?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. At first I was really stumped and I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. But when I got quiet for a second, what came up for me pretty immediately was this line that I feel like I'm trying to walk in the thought leadership space around politics. This is I feel an intense challenge here, because kind of everyone in the speaker community will tell you, if you're going to be a speaker and you're not actually like a political pundit, you need to stay the hell out of politics. Like it's like a minefield as a speaker. And I am finding this just really, really challenging. Like I'm really challenged by this because I think increasingly there's fewer boundaries between this area of study of mine for the last 20 years, which is work, and the world of politics. Like these things are getting very blurry, and they're getting very messed up together. And so it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to know where the line is, and to know I absolutely don't want to alienate people, right? I want as many people as want to discuss, how to create a better future. That's what I'm really about. And so I don't want to alienate anyone. And yeah, I just find it's increasingly blurry for me, like where that line goes. I don't know as clearly as I used to. So that's the whole challenge.
Well, and the reality is too, like you said, politics has come over the last several months, right? Has come barging into the domain that we occupy. Yeah. And so walking that line is challenging. And at the same token, you also want to advocate for the things you believe are most important, right? And so that is, I feel you. And I think a lot of people, even if you're not a speaker, I think just existing in work right now is really challenging on that front. So I don't think you're alone in that. I think there's a lot of us with you.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So let's talk my crystal ball. And this is different than a futurist question because I'm not asking you to predict what's going to happen. I'm asking you to sort of optimistically look into the future 5 years and tell me what you hope will be different about work then than it is today.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to set this up just a tiny bit, which is I'm a futurist who believes in like fourth turnings, basically. So if people aren't familiar with that terminology, right, there's a whole book. You can go read about it. It's by a guy named Neil Howe. And you can go look it up. But the basic idea is that there are there are seasons of life and of history. And this is when we say history repeats itself, this is a little bit what we mean, is that there's these cycles that tend to recur. And about every 80 to 100 years, we get something like a revolution. And so and you can think about this a little bit like seasons. And so what you have is you've got a kind of decaying winter season before where that involves the revolution and the crisis. And then what that does is it gives birth, just like the winter gives birth to the spring. Then new things can be born next. And so I'm a believer in this idea. And so when I look out 5 years, what I see us either, we're either in this crisis state a little bit further, like we're still in the winter season, or maybe we've gotten, through it and the signs of spring, or, maybe some seeds are starting to sprout and poke out of the ground. I'm not sure, because I think the time period is probably 5 to 10 years, something like that. But we'll see, right? These things are difficult to predict. But in 5 years, what I hope we see is I hope we are really starting to contend with the impact of the story of work on everything. So work right now is the organizing story of humanity, right? Like everything revolves around work and business, right? It's how we organize our lives. In some countries, it's how we get our health care, right? Like it's almost impossible to underestimate the impact of work/business on our lives. It really is the organizing story of life. And yet what we've got is we've got workplaces, we've got businesses that are able to currently externalize most of their costs into the future, right? We can put a bunch of junk into the rivers, and we can put a bunch of crap into the oceans and the atmosphere, and companies get the profits and they externalize the costs to the future. So in 5 years from now, I'm optimistic that we understand this a little bit better than we do today. And we're starting to make shifts to say, companies, you can't do that. Like, these are actually real costs that you need to contend with. And that we make structural changes to the way we think about business, especially global business, to where we don't ignore those invisible kind of externalized costs. And instead we say the future is actually, the future we want beyond 5 years is actually a stakeholder in our decisions today. And that we say, okay, this matters, right? These things that we do now matter because they will create the future. And the things we do now will create the future we want or that we don't. And so, yeah, my optimistic answer here is that I hope, right, we will just understand these interconnectednesses better than we do now.
I hope you're right. All right. Well, let's bring this home. I always like to wrap up with a quick check out. And so as we wrap up our conversation today, what one word best describes how you are feeling?
Excited.
For me, it's connected. I do not see you often enough, and I always feel a deep connection to you and your work when I do. So thank you for that. So let's recap on where people can find you, because I do want to put a quick plug in here. I actually have had Josh come and speak at an event that I organized. If that's there's no better sort of endorsement, I guess, than that. He is a really dynamic, compelling speaker. I always love to hear what he has to say. He makes you smarter. He makes you better. He loves to come in and work with leadership teams and speak to organizations. And so as one speaker to another, big respect. And so, Josh, remind people where they can find information about you and connect to you.
Yeah. The most important thing is to remember how I spell my middle name, which is Allan, Josh Allan, right? So I'm that Josh Allan with 2 A's and 2 L's. And joshallan.com is the best place. There's contact form on there, and my email, and you can even text me if you want to. I'd love to meet you and chat with you. The other great place is LinkedIn. If you just search for Josh Allan Dykstra, you'll certainly find me there. But I'd say those are the two places.
Excellent. We will include all of that in our show notes, in the episode description. And as a reminder, you can also find the awesome, generous offering of the worksheets on Josh's website at joshallan.com/Jason2025. So go find that. Josh, thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome and fun, and I certainly learned some things today. So I really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jason. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate you and your work so much. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. I hope that you maybe take a new perspective. I hope that you leave with some insights and that you feel inspired, or maybe you feel a little less intimidated by AI. You can take some of what Josh shared, some of these resources, and go back and start making a real impact in your workplace, or maybe on this cause, this thing that matters to you, that you can start, put your droid to work, man. There's a lot of work to do, and we need all hands on deck. So do that. And also, please remember, check in with the people in your life that matter the most. Now more than ever, when things are intense, when things are crazy, they need to hear from you. They want to hear from you, and you will feel better when you do it. So reach out and check in with them. Might be the most important thing you can do today. Till next time.